Oh, welcome. Viewers. Good evening. How are you? Welcome to our today's live. If you can see me, you can share. You can share so that we can begin this discussion together. So welcome to today's live. My name is Jennifer Chuma, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and I am very passionate about enlightening my people, the public, on the laws. And today I will be discussing with you on domestic violence and its impacts to the children who are exposed to scenarios of domestic violence. Domestic violence is a crime on its own, and it is defined under the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act of 2015 as any form of violence or threat of violence against another person with whom the first person or the person perpetrating the violence has a domestic relationship. This is to mean that when we are talking about domestic violence, it is not any other form of violence which happens maybe in the streets, in the office setups, in the church setups, but this is kind of violence which begins at where there is a domestic kind of relationship or a domestic setup. When I talk about domestic relationship or a domestic setup, in this case, I mean a spouse or a former spouse of the abuser or the person who is violent or perpetrating the violence. I also mean it can also be a housemate or someone you are sharing a house with, a family member, including a parent, a child, a sibling, or any other relative, or any other person you are related either by blood or in any other way, or a person who is or has been engaged, or you are in preparations for getting married to that person. So if violence occurs in that kind of setup, that can be termed as domestic violence. Or a person who has a close personal relationship. All those scenarios, if violence occurs in that setup, it falls squarely under the definitions or the confines of domestic violence. And therefore, what I want to make clear in this discussion is that, as I have said earlier, domestic violence, it doesn't have to be between a spouse, to be between spouses. It can even trickle down and affect even someone who is in a family setup, who is living with that family or with that person who is violent. And therefore, in this month of October, whereby the whole world will be will be saying no to any form of gender-based violence, I feel this discussion is very timely. And in that, I want now, having described what is domestic violence, I want now to look at what the law says and why domestic violence. Is it a crime or it is a social wrong? When you look at the Constitution of Kenya, which was passed in 2010, the Constitution outlaws any form of violence or any form of inhuman treatment. And in that, it protects every person and it guarantees them their right to protection, their right to life, their right to protection of their human dignity, and all that all related rights. Therefore, when now in a family setup or in a relationship setup, someone is trying to use their power or their lack of power to express themselves using violence, that automatically is against the law, because first of all, they are treating another person in an inhuman manner. They are affecting their dignity and all incidental rights. We also want to look at, if we look at the violence itself, it can either be physical, whereby someone is physically violent. It can be emotional, or it can be physical, emotional, or social, in the sense that physical is whereby the abuser or the person perpetrating the violence acts in a manner which inflicts pain to another person. Emotional is whereby this the let me just explain the part for physical. In physical, the physical is when we are talking about domestic violence. It is one of the main forms of violence in a domestic setup, because many people after maybe discussing this issue, they will be able to recognize or appreciate that in one way or the other, the physical violence trickles down and also causes the other forms of violence, which we will discuss. But in in physical violence, it takes the form of physical abuse, such as whereby a wife or a spouse, all a wife or a spouse, they they may physically assault the other. But this definition, the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act, it widens the scope of the kind of violence by including other forms of violence. Because if this person, they are physically abusive, it means by the time it reached to physical abuse, they had gone to an extent of emotionally or verbally or psychologically abusing the the other person. So this brings us to the other aspect of emotional, verbal, or psychological abuse, which is a pattern of degrading or humiliating conduct, where in major cases it's usually repeated. It shows itself by repeated actions of abuse, insults, ridicule, all calling the other person names which are derogatory, or they are disrespectful, and repeated actions of threats to cause which are meant to cause emotional pain to the other person. Therefore, if you have been in a scenario or a situation whereby you are getting you are called names, um there is a abuse, like a name calling, you are being ridiculed, all being told how even your brain cannot understand simple concepts, and all that, that amounts to a form of violence, which is emotional. And I want us to get it clear. When we talk about violence, violence can be done by the wife or the husband or man or woman. So here we are not just generalizing or just pointing fingers and saying it's only a man who is capable of